I know people love arguing about who the best Batman is. Is it Christian Bale? Maybe some George Clooney, Michael Keaton, perhaps? Same thing with the Joker. Some people argue that it's Jared Leto, maybe Heath Ledger, Mark Hamill, but nobody wants to talk about who the best Riddler is. Why isn't this more of a conversational topic? Is it Paul Dano or is it Jim Carrey? Yeah, I bet you forgot that Jim Carrey was the Riddler. Remember him wearing that weirdo green spandex suit? Such a riveting performance. And at the end there where he says, I'm the Batman, I actually believed it for a second. Isn't there like a fan theory somewhere out there that the entire film takes place in Riddler's head and he is like technically Batman? I don't know. I might have just invented that. It's maybe not even a thing. Anyways, all jokes aside, today we're going to be talking about the first look Batman from Detective Comics 27. This is all the way back in 1939. And I know what you guys are thinking. This guy's ancient, right? He was probably around when this comic book got printed. Well, I'm not that old, okay? I wasn't even alive yet. My father wasn't even alive yet, but such an iconic look. And I had my doubts about whether McFarlane would ever release this particular version of Batman, or I should say the original version of Batman, but here we have him in front of us, and I have to say it's pretty exciting. This is a figure that I had in mind for quite some time. It was one of those figures that if I saw it in person and it genuinely spoke to me, then I was going to pick it up. If not, I was just going to pass along, which is the main reason why I decided not to pre-order this. But I just happened to be shopping around Target. I found him, I took him home, and I'll be brutally honest, I don't have a lot of experience with wired capes. This may be one of my first few wired capes in quite some time. I used to do a lot of import figures, and those usually come with wired capes, but I haven't really dabbled too much when it comes down to imported figures. So like I said, don't have a lot of experience with wired capes, but I can't believe that McFarlane decided to give us one at that $22 price point. It does come with a decent amount of accessories as well, 6 hands total, and then it comes with that wrench. I will say that wrench, from what I remember, because I do kind of recall reading that $1 reprinted comic book version of Detective Comic Books 27, and if I recall correctly, this is supposed to be featured in like 1 or 2 different panels throughout the comic book series. It's not even like an important wrench that he like carries around with him or anything. It's not like one of his gadgets or anything crazy like that. So it's interesting that McFarlane decided to throw it in there. I think it's kind of a nod to hardcore comic book readers or people that are really into that phase of the collectibles, because only they would understand what the wrench means. Everybody else is kind of like, what is this? Is he a mechanic? Does he moonlight as a plumber? What's going on? I mean, the gloves are another interesting touch. I really like the wrinkles, the texture on it, but I will say he might have gone overboard a little bit. This kind of reminds me of like those people, like this version of Batman is like really insecure. I mean, maybe he has like really small hands, but he's like, yeah, I'm an extra large, you know, my purple gloves are extra large. I have big manly hands. No, you don't, Batman. Wear your size. You're probably like a smaller and medium. And you can definitely see that the gloves are like, I don't know if they're oversized or he was just going for something else, but they look really wrinkly. I don't love it, but it's something, you know, it's a nice little detail. It's a nice little touch that he probably didn't have to add in there. In terms of the body mold, at this point, if you've collected DC Multiverse for any stretch of time from McFarlane, you're very familiar with it. We've seen it quite a few times, and it has essentially the same issues. There's no retooling here, which was, I think, a little bit disappointing for people that already have this particular body mold. The ab crunch forward is absolutely horrendous. It's a joke. He definitely needs to go back in there, figure out a way to get, you know, better seamless articulation there. The head actually can't look up either, which is another really big issue. The ball joints are really weird. He's kind of like reverting back to the old school ball joints that he had. There was a time where he was really hiding them well, especially in those ankles and the wrists, but he's going back to having them there, and I'm not really a big fan of it unless it's going to articulate really well, which in some cases the ankles have a lot of trouble rocking back and forth, and so you can't really get his feet to lay flat. There are no big issues. I mean, like the double jointed knees are great, the double jointed elbows, and I continue to defend that soft plastic pelvic area. It really helps with articulation, kicking the leg forward, backward. A lot of people love to hate on the proportions for McFarlane, but the main reason for that, the main reason that the legs look extremely long and then the pelvic area looks kind of short is just for the range of motion. Because it's soft plastic and because the legs are kind of kicked up into the torso a little bit too much, it does look like they have legs for days, but it honestly, it's better for articulation. And if you're a big stickler for that kind of stuff, if you love dynamic poses, you'll understand. Whereas if you went the other route where the legs were a little bit shorter and compressed and maybe the pelvic area kind of reached lower and was hard plastic, it would really limit the articulation. So McFarlane knows what he's doing to an extent. Obviously, it's not a perfect figure, and the articulation overall for this body mold has to get better. I mean, we've had this body mold for quite some time. He's reused it for an extended period. It's time for him to kind of retool it, whatever it is that he needs to do to make the head look up better. The forward ab crunch is, obviously somewhat ridiculous. And then there's no thigh cut, which is something that I think would help really a lot with articulation, and it's just missing. Now, I said this at the beginning of the video, and I'll be brutally honest, I don't have a ton of experience with wired or cloth capes in general. It's definitely been quite some time since I last tried an imported figure, which is usually where you see a lot of these wired / cloth capes. And yes, the fabric does feel incredibly thin, as well as the wire. Like, I feel if you overextended the wire or maybe bent it a little bit too much, it could easily break. But again, you're talking about a $22-23 figure, even with taxes like 25. I can't even remember the last time that we received a cloth cape or a wired cape at that particular price point. You just don't see it that often. I flexed it and posed it around, and I absolutely loved it. I think it adds like an extra layer of complexity to every single pose that you can throw at this figure, which I personally feel like would make perfect sense. Maybe not for the later Batmans, because every time that we're introduced to a new Batman or a new universe, it seems like the cape is capable of doing way more things than we remember. Like, for example, there are some capes that are bulletproof, others that help Batman glide, so on and so forth. So I think later in the comic books, the cape was capable of doing way more things. But at least from like his first appearances, I don't remember the cape really being able to do much. So it would kind of make sense that the cape would just be blowing in the wind randomly, regardless of what Batman was doing, whether he's running or just walking in a windy day, or jumping from building to building, or using his grapple to glide. I think in any situation, it would just make sense for the cape to just be flapping around everywhere. Probably would be very dangerous, maybe. I don't know. It would create like some drag, or it would get in your face, I guess. I don't know. But it just makes perfect sense for the cape to just kind of be flowing. And so I love the way that this displays. One downside, and maybe the only well, I shouldn't say the only downside, but one of the bigger downsides is it does not come with an action figure stand. You have to go in there, try to find one from an older DC Multiverse figure or from any other stand that you might have lying around. So a little bit frustrating. I've said this before, and I think McFarlane definitely needs to up his game when it comes down to including action figure stands, especially for their DC collector's edition line. I think that one definitely feels like it needs an action figure stand, especially for that particular price point. So overall, what are my thoughts on the figures? What score would I give it? I don't like giving numbered scores, you guys know this, but I'd say it's like a low solid 8. It's like an 8.1, 8.2, around there. It's a really well designed figure. I love the fact that they decided to give us a golden age, or just a classic looking Batman. I love the head sculpt. I love the wired cape. I love the accessories that it came with, but it's definitely not perfect. The action figure or the head can't look up at all. The forward ab crunch is an absolute joke. There's no thigh cut. The wrench was a really cool nod to hardcore comic book readers, but in the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't seem like an accessory that I'm going to utilize. So I think it's a little bit of wasted plastic there. So it's not a perfect figure, but you're paying $22.99 for a figure that has a wired cape with extra hands. I mean, what else could you ask for? It's not a perfect figure, but it's definitely worth picking up and throwing on your display. It's still a phenomenal look, and it is one of the most iconic Batman suits ever. So I still personally strongly suggest you pick this up. I think this is a must-have if you're a hardcore Batman fan. But again, that is just my personal opinion, my personal take. Some people may think differently. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. I have heard some people having issues with like the head popping off, or I believe like the arm coming apart at the bicep. I'm not sure. I didn't run into those issues personally, but let me know your thoughts down below. Is this a must-have? Is it not? What other versions of Batman do you want to see from McFarlane? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay safe out there, and as always, the most important part of this entire thing is to enjoy the hobby. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.